in there at one point. So you gotta know how to utilize concentric rings. Concentric rings does not work if whoever's in command and control does not have comms with each one of those concentric rings and can adjust and receive intel accordingly. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's got to be controlled. It definitely has to be controlled. Um, Obviously, he is. I hate to say it, he's not accepting the fact that you're the detail leader. You are ultimately responsible for all that,
Yeah,
right? The
yeah,
and a lot of this could have. And I know they said something about they started 2 weeks out, right? Started 2 weeks
yep.
out doing
First time on
somewhat of a
venue. Yeah,
yeah. Started looking at the venue, their version of an advance. And they had an app where they were filling in information. There's a couple of problems with that. One is because if we're making a move and we're relying on outside personnel, do they have access to that information? Do we control the information that goes to them, and do we actually get a complete brief, which we should actually do? All the parties
everyone.
involved is
Yep,
actually, hey, we don't do an operation without an operations brief, right? So if we have outliers, those people that we actually rely on, i.e., in this case, law enforcement assistants, to make us successful, we have to include them, right, with whatever that brief is, whether
for
it's a
sure.
Zoom call, whatever the fact is, we have to do a brief so everybody understands what their actual actions on the venue is, right? And we all understand that, we all hear it, and we have a plan as a detail leader, right? If something goes to the left or to the right, on how to actually accommodate for that. And
Yeah.
we've done this for years. We understand that.
So I saved this down towards the last, but I think it's a good part, a good point to piggyback in on that because I had this down. He asked the question, do I need to come after and ask questions from a grown ass man
Ooh, yeah,
and to check to make sure that they're doing their job? And of course, we
that's your
know
job.
we know
Yeah,
the answer to that is yes. You
yeah,
do have to do that because, as you say, that is your job, being the overall command and control of this detail. You can compartmentalize areas of responsibility. You can assign different tasks. You can actually coordinate so that you have tandem movement between your team and the statutory authority agency that's there so that you can get some of that statutory authority to be able to be in the areas that you need to be in to pull off this move. Um, and following up to, do I need to do that? You do, because every day in jobs that matter, whether security, military, law enforcement, whatever it is, there are always grown ass men overseeing other grown ass men. Because you know what? Grown ass men get lazy, grown ass men assume, and grown ass men um, sometimes just make bad decisions. They make poor decisions. So yes, you do have to do that. The fact that that was asked, it's very concerning on my part.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I agree
go
with
ahead.
you wholeheartedly. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, and I think the big thing to take away from this is you can delegate responsibility to divide and conquer certain tasks that need to be completed. It seems as though there's the terms that were said. We only had 30 meters out. That was the protection team. That was their responsibility. Um, that does not negate you from the detail later, the leader, to be responsible and accountable for all of the other areas of responsibility that were taking place or that were being executed during that time. And if they weren't being executed, you needed to have that information in real time and then execute a plan to make sure that it was covered.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's yeah, I know we're beating that up the just because that is
It's
so
important.
crucial and important. It is
Yes.
the foundation, right, to keep your client or your principal out of harm's way.
All right. So let's talk about the elephant in the room here. This screenshot I have up
X,
here.
yes, sir.
Yep. So Tracy, go ahead and read that for me if you don't mind, please.
Yeah, absolutely. It says Hey, hello, Chief Long. We received this message today from the student group for your situational awareness. There is student roof access pretty close to where Charlie Kirk will be, set up at the Utah Valley. The Sorensen Student Center has a couple staircases that go up to the walkway on the roof. Supposedly, the chief responds with, "You want access to the roof?"
Can you hold right there for a second?
Yes, sir.
What would the answer be at that point?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
If the response is yes, we just negated a lot of problems right now. Look, it's offered up right. Do you want access to the roof? Yes, we do. We do have access. And then if for some reason the chief come back and said, we can give you access. However, one of my guys needs to be there with you. And you'd
Yeah, it
say,
would have solved a lot.
excellent.
Yeah.
Yep. It's preferable. All right, go
You
ahead.
know, with that said, though, I think that the text was, uh, I believe, when it was on the show, was mischaracterized, because we'll get into that second part here,
Yep.
which is,
I
"Hey, do
agree.
you want access to the roof?" And then he goes on to say, "I was told students have access above us. If this is true, it would be nice to either have it controlled access or allow one of my guys to be there as well, if possible. I got you covered." First of all, um, "I got you covered" it is not an actual reply. I would
Yeah.
actually, I want to go further, and I
Yep.
would actually have a phone conversation also with that.
Yeah.
Text is great for a planning phase, right? If you want to start putting a plan together, but you have to have a brief and you have to have
Yeah.
conversation. So
Definitive.
everybody, yeah, absolutely. So everybody understands exactly what it entails. So he got this part, right, which was the part you were talking about before, which is the police
Overhang.
officer, yeah, and one of his guys above them. So uh, I don't understand why that you know that I think that it was secondary thought process with the other point, and of course, not following through on his part um, was part of the failure
Yep. The
portion.
follow through was the big part on this one. And to us, because we discussed it earlier, this text message, if in fact it is, legit and accurate, that does show the disconnect right there. And
Absolutely,
and a disconnect like that is definitely where the ball is dropped, and not having that, as we just said earlier, having that definition of roles and responsibilities, and what does that look like? It sounded like, to your point, it sounded like that played out. They've got the upper hang over top of Charlie, and where over us is our bubble, to use his term, because
right?
that's where they're all concentrated. So much emphasis on the 3,000. You cannot look at 3,000 people. I'm deviating here for a second, but it's got me on that thought. You
Yeah,
can't look at a group of 3,000 people and think that you are controlling or you are vetting 3,000 people at that point. You control what you can control. Some of that was done, some of it was not done. You could have controlled that high ground with the observation post. You can control the high ground over top of the speaking engagement. You had everything concentrated into the crowd, to the point you had two security individuals in there doing field interviews amongst the crowd. That's two positions that were misappropriated, in my point, at least two positions. Your thoughts on
absolutely.
that part?
Yeah, absolutely. And from what I understand, also is the student microphone was actually controlled by security. They were
Yeah,
letting them in
yeah,
that shoot way, if you will, to the microphone, which that could have been someone other than security, an
yeah.
admin person of some type, dealing with that. So I think the the lack of understanding of appropriate placement of personnel is another failure point also.
Yep. Yep. Now, in my opinion, and your uniform personnel would have been better served in the areas around that crowd. You got them in the crowd. If you could picture, and I know you and I are just discussing this because we know this thoroughly, but for the for
Sure.
whoever's viewing this thing, if I am over top, if I'm that person over top, and I have the overwatch into that crowd, and I have comms with our local campus police, I can vector them into persons of concern or have them to come check on things. Now, a lot of statutory authority was mentioned in there. That's the perfect time where you have your uniformed campus police go out there and intercede amongst people of concern.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Perfect placement. I did not hear where he had the uniformed police officers located, and
yeah,
maybe he didn't know where they were himself. In that essence, because him and the chief appear that they're not on the same sheet of music on
yep,
what
yep.
is required or the assistance required from the local law enforcement.
And we discussed this earlier, right after it happened, which was, hey, if there was a breakdown in coordination, um, at that point, what's the chances that there were integrated comms between the security team
Yeah.
and the police officers that were assisting? Because I heard also, in addition to the concentric circles, there was I think he mentioned PACE plan too.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
nice to mention all of those
Buzzwords.
fundamental concepts and the
Yeah.
buzzwords, but if you don't know how to utilize them or even attempt to implement them, then it's all for naught. It's all smoke and mirrors.
This is
And I hate to speak that way, and we've talked about it a
yeah.
lot, debating about how do we look at this, but you know, our biggest qualms, you and I have talked, for years, is that there's just too many incidences out there. There's too many security elements out there, whether it's law enforcement or executive protection or whatever, that just dance around all these certain subjects, right? And to that, they talk about buzzwords, they talk about a lot of different things, but this brings it home. This is for real. Like you have to know what you're doing in this arena without a doubt. And if you don't, when that true threat shows up, you're going to expose your underbelly, and it's going to be at someone else's detriment, unfortunately.
Yeah. It almost, and I hate saying it this way, it's almost like the law enforcement and everybody there treated it more like when you see um officers working off duty in uniform at a fair or a carnival. They're just milling about.
Good point.
There's
Good
no
point.
there's no
Yeah.
control of where they need. No, they're not controlling access. They're not controlling, certain locations that would, be a threat to the principal or the team. Um, so I think part of that is incumbent of the detail leader to have a more in-depth conversation with whoever's controlling. In this case, it's the chief of the campus police.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, they actually need to get on the same sheet of music. I can't say that enough, right? Like you said, definitive. This is what you're doing. This is what we're doing. The day before, we're going to talk again and see if anything's changed, right? And go from there. So there's got to be some conversation. I think that gets missed a lot, and we both know
Yeah.
um, advances are paramount, right? And relationships are paramount in this business. Being
No
able to
doubt.
build
No
rapport
doubt.
and people, understanding what the other one's saying. And if you don't think they understand, right, clarify it. Go, hey, Kevin, this is what I'm talking about. How do you see that?
Yep.
Then you give it back to me. If we're in
If
agreement
it
with whatever
jives,
that
yeah.
plan is, then we're good, golden. We're good.
Here's my last thought on this, because we're actually getting ready to wrap up here
Yes,
shortly.
sir.
Is uh, I feel that, and I'll base this going back to there was a prior security individual that I guess that had the security detail a while back. They got on Fox News immediately afterwards, and I think the statement was, no one would have thought in 1,000 years that something like this would have been an option, as far as
Oh
a
yeah,
sniper.
I
I,
remember that.
I do
Yeah.
believe that comes into play quite a bit in this respect. The concentration was obviously around the crowd, the 3,000 people there. So we had, and